So first, I'm going to introduce Guillermo Alberto Hidalgo Montes. He is a security consultant with a master's degree in legal and criminal psychology from the University of Puebla, Mexico. He is also the master from the Public Security of the Mexican Institute of Investigation and Development of Police Science, and is an expert in the use of police force and a diplomatic police administration from the Technology Institute of Monterrey and the National Commission for Safety. He is an instructor and director at the Puebla Police Academy and is presented on police issues in many other Mexican states. He writes for Security Blog and has appeared on Univision Radio in Los Angeles and Univision Spanish TV. He is an expert in drug cartels and street gangs and co-authored a book, Introducción al Análisis y Investigación de Pandillas en México. Bienvenidos.
Gracias.
And the next we have Pablo Cajigal del Ángel. He is a consultant and teacher on criminal information analysis for SGI Global in support of the international affairs on narcotics and application of the law for the U.S. Department of State. He served for 5 years in the anti-narcotics section of the embassy in Mexico City, as well as being an advisor on drug cartel activity all over Mexico. Previously, he served as an investigator in the state of Chihuahua, investigating such things as the Barrio Azteca riot at El Cerezo prison, and has documented street gang activities in Juarez and elsewhere in Mexico. He is co-author also with Mr. Hidalgo Montes of the Introducción al Análisis y Investigación de Pandillas en Mexico that we showed on our title slide. He has also taught for me in Seattle for the International Latino Gang Investigators Association as part of the Mexican delegation. Bienvenidos.
Gracias.
And next we have Victor Galaza Abisai, and he arrived in the United States as a Mexican diplomat for approximately 6 years. He was first attached to the Mexican consulate in Chicago, Illinois, and was later attached to the permanent mission of the Organization of American States in Washington, D.C. During his time as a diplomat, he trained with the Mexican Army, Mexican Navy, the Presidential Security Services, and the U.S. Army, as well as the German Army and many other U.S. law enforcement agencies. In addition, he attended Loyola University and Farley Dickinson University. After surrendering his diplomatic status, he became a legal permanent resident of the United States and was involved in the service industry on the East Coast, and then also was the owner of a bar there in Durango, Colorado. He then became a post-certified peace officer and subject matter expert for the state of Colorado on Mexican transnational criminal organizations. He is currently a detective and assigned to the narcotics investigation team there in Colorado. He has received numerous awards and has provided training since 2014 to multiple police agencies via the Vigilance Project. Welcome, Victor.
Muchas gracias.
And next we have Mr. Tony Kale. Tony is Southern Regional Director for the Symbolic Intelligence Group, a private law enforcement resource firm that specializes in counterterrorism research and education. As a former deputy sheriff and practicing cultural anthropologist, he has over 25 years experience documenting African and religious cultures throughout the United States and Africa. He has also provided training for the FBI, U.S. Capitol Police, U.S. Attorney's Office, and U.S. Army. He has written numerous publications, including the Journal of Counterterrorism and Homeland Security, Law and Order Magazine, and Police Quarterly. He's also written several books, one which was depicted on the opening slide, The Secret History of Memphis Hoodoo, Root Workers, Conjurers, and Spirituals, Santa Muerte, Mexico's mysterious saint of death and narco cults, and understanding the use of Afro-Caribbean and Mexican religious cultures in the drug wars. Dave Weiserman is a drug policy reform lobbyist and has been involved in educating the community on substances ranging from cannabis, heroin, and everything else in between. Having battled his own demons and escaped the clutches of opioid dependency after he had contracted Crohn's disease, he now advocates for progressive evidence-based drug policy reform and is attempting to change the status quo so that substance use is seen as a public health issue instead of a criminal justice one. He has advocated for different drug policy bills across the United States. And when not lobbying, he is also performing homeless outreach on the streets. And he has trained over 250 individuals how to properly administer naloxone and also fentanyl test strips to possibly detect opioid overdose. His experiences has now brought him to where he is now in the fight for liberty and drug reform. He is also a reviewer for my book that was also depicted on the opening slide, How We Lost the Drug War and How We Can Win It Back. Welcome, Dave. And lastly, we have JD Leza, who is going to be our moderator. I'm going to be handing over the reins to JD here shortly. And I want to tell the audience a little bit about him. He barely graduated from high school, but then went on to earn 2 undergraduate degrees from the University of Washington and a graduate degree from Princeton University. He has also been blessed to be a philanthropic grant maker, municipal and federal government employee, a nonprofit leader, and independent contract consultant. JD has studied and written extensively about the disproportionate impacts of the U.S. drug war, mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, and mass incarceration. He is very, very passionate about this subject, and I thought he would be the perfect guy to moderate and facilitate this discussion. He also reviewed my book on the drug war, and I really, really appreciate all the effort you put into this, JD. I'm going to hand it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. I'm going to jump in right into questions. I had a little bit of an intro, but I'm going to jump right in for time's sake. So, Victor, I'm going to call on you. Given the current and historic differences between indigenous and native populations in the United States, Mexico, and Central and South America, how do sovereignty and cross-cultural misunderstanding and bias influence and shape the drug war?
Primero, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias de Colorado.
Buenas tardes. You're from Colorado?
Thank you very much for being here along all these true experts in their fields or subjects. And,
Gracias por estar aquí en todos los expertos en estas organización.
First, I'll address the definition of sovereignty. Sovereignty
Primero,
is having
quisiera hacer la definición de soberano.
supreme power and authority of a government over a territory and or a state.
La suprema justicia del gobierno.
First, the very first thing that comes to mind is a phrase that I heard in Mexico probably thousands of times: la soberanía de la República Mexicana. This concept in Mexico is about maintaining sovereignty of their nation. In Mexico, there's a thing in which they don't like the manipulating, the mingling of other nations in Mexico by itself. Mexico likes to have their own way of doing things. And
México le gusta hacer sus propias cosas.
Things of doing their way. They have policies, they have procedures, and these procedures are meant to protect.
México tiene sus propias pólizas y sus procedimientos.
And what really needs to happen, we need to understand, we need to come together, not just the U.S., not just Mexico, but nations around the world that are affected by
Pero toda la nación que son afectadas, no solo México, toda la nación.
Come together and provide security and safety for the people of Mexico.
Unirnos y
right after
proveer
we're done
seguridad.
with that, we can address the drug war. Then I'll address the other definition, which would be a bias. What is bias?
La otra definición sería La parcialidad.
Bias is the preconceived, unreasoned opinion about an individual or a thing. Anti-bias policing and community policing in the United States has been a major part of every curriculum for every law enforcement agency that's been accredited for a very long time. In fact, these two, community policing and anti-bias policing, are considered crucial for the mission of law enforcement. Now, obviously, law enforcement by itself is not inherently biased, but because due to mistraining, lack of training, lack of knowledge, misconceptions, not understanding cultural awareness relating to the Mexican people, there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misinformation. And at one point, law enforcement has not been able to tell the differences between criminal indicators and non-criminal indicators. And in fact, this inability
Esta inhabilidad
to be able to tell the differences between these indicators has
Para la
prevented law enforcement from
que ha prevenido
interdicting, has
okay,
been
continue.
unable to interdict the individuals that are hiding here in plain sight. That would be the concept of sovereignty and bias against certain groups, if you want to call it that. The inability to be able to come
La
together,
inhabilidad de unirnos,
both Mexico, the United States,
México y Estados Unidos,
the country as a whole,
el mundo entero,
to provide security and safety for the great people of Mexico. That should be
para
mission
proveer
number one.
seguridad en los mexicanos.
Second, provide
La
better
seguridad,
training, teaching,
proveer
cultural
entrenamiento
awareness to law
y,
enforcement in the United States.
y seguridad para Estados Unidos.
Thank you, Victor. And thank you so much, Erica. You're doing great. It's just going to be a challenge. These guys know their stuff and they want to talk about it. Thank you so much, Victor. Pablo, tell us a little bit about your experience maybe. And we were sharing a story that about Pablo Escobar, difference between what I was seeing from the United States and what you were experiencing in Mexico.
Pablo, si nos puede dar lo que usted vivió con Pablo Escobar, perdón, con el Chapo, ¿no?
El Chapo, sí.
Sí, con el Chapo. ¿Qué experiencia tuvo usted con ese caso?
Bien, buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yo era, en el 2008, yo era un oficial de policía.
In 2008, he
Investigador.
was an official for the police. He was an investigator for the police department
En Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, México.
in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico.
En ese entonces se desató una guerra
At that
contra las
time,
drogas,
war began
anunciada por el gobierno federal,
with the federal government,
y el escenario de guerra, el territorio de guerra fue esa ciudad, Ciudad
and the
Juárez.
territory of the scene, that's where it began.
Y fue un enfrentamiento entre el cártel de Sinaloa,
And it was a confrontation between the cartel of Sinaloa,
dirigido por el Chapo Guzmán,
directed by
y
Chapo
el
Guzmán.
cártel de Juárez.
and the Juárez cartel.
Fue algo brutal.
It was brutal.
Había alrededor de 50 ejecuciones diarias.
There was about 50 executions daily.
Eso lo que hizo fue que colapsaran todos los sistemas de seguridad y justicia,
That's what security and justice collapsed
cuando menos ahí en ese estado, en Chihuahua,
in that state of Chihuahua.
era un caos total.
It was chaos.
Nunca entendimos la estrategia.
We never understood this tragedy.
Había en ese entonces más de 10,000
At that time, there were 10,000
soldados y policía federal
and federal police
en esa ciudad de 1,500,000 habitantes.
in a population of 1,500,000 people.
Entonces, lo que se vivió en ese momento
So what we lived at that time,
fue una guerra real,
it was the real war,
y todos los niveles de seguridad
and
completos
the levels of security,
fueron colapsando.
they just collapsed.
Había homicidios,
There were
robos,
homicides,
extorsiones,
robberies,
secuestros,
extortions, kidnaps,
violaciones de todo tipo.
Abuse of everything, every type of abuse.
Un caos.
It was just chaos.
Lo interesante es de que el mensaje era
What was
que
interesting was the message.
todo eso era para la seguridad de las personas.
It was just for the security of the people.
Entonces las personas no entendían o no
People
entendíamos
didn't understand. We just didn't understand
como si antes vivíamos una calma,
how
calma.
we lived peace. We had peace, and then
de
all of-
repente era
all of
todo
a
una
sudden,
guerra
it was
en una
just
ciudad
war.
De inseguridad y caos, y
Of
era
chaos
algo
and
muy,
security.
muy feo.
It was just terrible.
Ahora, ya más de 10 años que ha pasado esto,
Now that after 10 years,
nada ha cambiado.
nothing has changed.
Al contrario, ya no se
the
vive
contrary.
solamente en Ciudad Juárez,
It's not only
sino
in Juarez,
casi en la mitad del país, en México.
but half of the country, not only in Juarez.
Entonces, la guerra contra las drogas ha traído muchas desgracias
So the war
en
against
México,
drugs,
definitivamente, bajo esa estrategia,
a lot of disgrace.
si es que se puede llamar estrategia.
If we can call it tragedy.
Thank you so much. It's really terrifying to me here in the United States. We rarely ever see what's happening in Mexico right across the border. And to imagine that from one day you were living in a very peaceful city, and then the very next day there was a war between two factions or two cartels.
Entender cómo de Estados Unidos que eso está pasando en México. Y no podemos entender que uno piensa que hay paz, pero en realidad no la hay.
Does any of the other panelists want to jump in or share, add more, or say anything else on those things?
As of today, Mexican government estimates that there's 300,000 people that have died in Mexico.
Hasta ahorita, los Estados Unidos estiman que hay como 300,000 gente que ha muerto en la
62,000 people missing.
62,000 personas desaparecidas.
Over 900 narcofosas found with God knows how many bodies.
Y que han encontrado 900 cuerpos.
Narcofosas. On top of that, in the last national election,
aparte de eso de la elección pasada,
117 candidates of all levels
117 millones de mil candidatos de todo
were assassinated by these
fueron
organizations.
asesinados por esta organización.
A report just came out by the National Command here in the United States
Reportes que salieron aquí en los Estados Unidos
that state that 35% of the
que
country that does
35%
not
del
see
país,
the rule of law is
la ley,
controlled
la ley,
by
la
these
regla de la ley
organizations,
por estas organizaciones.
which today is approximately 300
Que
to
hoy en día
100
son 300,000
different transnational criminal organizations,
diferentes organizaciones,
DTOs, drug trafficking organizations, regional mafias, transnational criminal organizations, organizaciones de transnacional, de crimen transnacional, DTOs,
Thank you.
organizaciones de tráfico de drogas, organizaciones regionales de crimen, gangs, pandillas, and all this, everything, all this has
todo esto
created a war, just like
se ha
Pablo has
creado
said,
en guerra.
a war against not only the Mexican government,
No solamente el gobierno mexicano,
but the Mexican people.
pero la gente mexicana.
And that strikes me to the heart.
Y eso es lo que nos duele.
So let me shift gears a little bit. Albert, I'm going to ask you the next question. The drug war in the U.S. the drug war is not just a U.S. war, as we've been talking about, and it's not just about drugs.
Como el regionalismo, nacionalismo y globalización tecnológica no es solo el impacto de las guerras de drogas.
No, no es un tema de Estado, no es un tema aislado.
It's not a isolated topic.
Es un tema regional.
It's a regional topic.
Como muy bien comentó Víctor,
Like Victor mentioned,
el error de México
the mistake of Mexico
es creer que el mundo gira alrededor de México.
is think the world evolves around Mexico.
Estamos en un mundo interconectado.
We are in a world of
Interconnected world.
connected world.
Y eso nos trae muchos problemas.
And that brings a lot of problems.
Si nosotros no generamos una política articulada,
If we cannot project a political articulated
policy,
policy,
vamos a tener muchos problemas como los hemos tenido.
we're going to have a lot of problems like we have been.
Lo que pasa aquí repercute en Estados Unidos.
What happens here,
reflects also in the United States.
yes,
No.
exactly,
Y viceversa.
and vice versa.
Un presidente en los años 60, mexicano,
In the 1960s, a Mexican president,
dijo que si México se veía como un trampolín,
if Mexico would look like a trampoline,
es porque del otro lado había una alberca.
is because on the other side there was a swimming pool.
Entonces, si no controlamos los TCOs, que son Transnational Crime Organizations,
If we cannot control the TCOs,
vamos a tener problemas más graves aún.
we're going to have severe problems.
Ahora, los pongo en contexto.
I'm going to put in a context.
He sido policía por 21 años.
I've been in the police department for 21 years.
Soy el único mexicano que ha sido director de academia de policía en 4 estados diferentes.
I've been the only Mexican that has been a director of the police academy
In 4 different states.
for different states.
Víctor comentó muy bien que el problema es la capacitación.
Victor mentioned that the problem is the capacity,
The training, the law enforcement training.
the law enforcement training.
Y el problema es que con la ayuda que tenemos, incluso a través del gobierno de Estados Unidos,
And the problem that we have that with the help with the United States,
les juro que tenemos policías
I can
de
swear that we
nivel
have,
estatal y municipal de primer nivel. Pero tenemos los jefes de policías más ineptos del mundo. No, ineptitud.
ineptitude. We just
So,
have
We have excellent law enforcement officers in the lower levels, but in the highest levels, that training doesn't exist because we have law enforcement directors that have any experience. That the only good thing that they have, it's a bond of friendship with the government. So it's very hard to work with that.
Thank you so much. Very good. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Somebody maybe who has Tony? Anybody else?
What Victor started with and Alberto touched on, combination of both things really strike me. There is a tremendous amount of misinformation regarding culture.
Hay mucho mal entendimiento tocante a
Involving culture and understanding culture.
tocante la cultura y el mal entendimiento.
This combined
Esto combina
with the mindset
con la mente
that has been projected from
que ha sido proyectada,
certain individuals and organizations,
posiciones individuales,
that the people of Mexico are the problem.
que la gente de México es el problema.
When the reality, as
Cuando la
Victor
realidad
shared, is that the people of Mexico are the ones suffering as a
que la
result.
gente de México está sufriendo
the perception that a cartel coming from a region means the people in the region are connected to violence and crime is very erroneous, yet it's a widespread belief. These types of perceptions are what lend to
Estos tipos
bias
de
information,
percepción,
misunderstandings of culture.
en parcialidad y
in-
malentendimiento cultural.
In anthropology, we talk about two different views, the insider view and the outsider view. From the outside, when the media and politicians fill our heads with misinformation,
Cuando las noticias y el medio da muy mal información,
there is one perception.
hay una percepción.
When we hear voices from the people who are suffering and
Cuando
witnessing
las voces de la
suffering
gente que está afectada,
from inside, this is a very different view.
que de esta parte es una
Thank you. Yes. And I think this is a bridge that we've got to continue to
Yo
build
pienso que este es un puente que tenemos que
in order to create understanding.
enfocarnos para entender.
I think that we do have a lot of misconceptions about
Yo pienso que
Mexico,
tenemos mucho mal,
the people of Mexico, and the culture of Mexico.
misconcepción de la cultura mexicana.
And I think this is one of our challenges.
Y yo pienso que esta es nuestra batalla.
Coincido totalmente con Tony.
I agree with Tony.
El problema es cultural de ambos países.
The problem is culture, both countries.
He tenido compañeros de Estados Unidos que vienen a dar cursos aquí.
I've had colleagues that come and give
Training
there in Mexico.
From the US. Y
From
se
the US.
sorprenden de que existen Walmarts.
And then they're surprised that there's Walmart.
O sea, realmente, a pesar de que somos vecinos,
Even if we're neighbors,
a veces nos vemos demasiado alejados y pensamos que vivimos en otro mundo.
although we're neighbors, we feel like we just live in a different world.
Y quiero mostrarles con una gráfica.
And I'm going to show you a graphic.
Aquí son los policías de menor grado.
The blue part is the police in low grade.
A low grade.
Low grade.
And this is our police chiefs in terms of training. So as you can see, the problem it's not in the base; it's in the top of the pyramid. It's a huge challenge, and we must understand that we are neighbors, we are brothers, and we must have a common policy to win this war.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Dave next. Dave, you've heard what these guys are working on, what they're working with, and what they're trying to accomplish. Can you tell us that we were just talking about training, about cultural understanding from your experience here in the United States? What would you recommend as far as how can we improve training? How can we convince more senior officers and chiefs to take more training themselves? And then maybe from there, you could talk about some other policy reforms or some other changes you might like to see.
From this side of the border, they wouldn't need to do that if we were not the world's ultimate consumer of drugs. Without a buyer, without a buyer, you're not going to have a seller.
Sin ningún distribuidor no vamos a tener un comprador de las drogas.
So I believe that, I mean, it's work that needs to be done on both ends. And on the American side, we fact that there's something going on where 1 in 10 adolescents become opioid addicts nowadays.
Que ahora
Um,
adolescentes se involucran en las drogas y son adictos al opium.
it's a cultural thing, and I don't think it has to do with the addictiveness of said substance.
No creo que sea la adicción de la sustancia.
I think it has to do with the individual, their
Yo creo-
upbringing, their community, their surroundings, and
Creo que
our
el-
American way of life.
Y la vida.
I
Yeah.
agree too. Thank you, Dave. And Pablo also, I talked to Pablo about the focus on youth and how, Pablo, tell us a little bit more about as opposed to investing in other things. Go ahead, Erica.
Pablo, nosotros hablamos de la investigación de la juventud. ¿Me escucha?
Sí, por supuesto. Hablamos de la juventud. Hay un tema muy importante
There's a
que
very
tratar en,
important topic that we need to.
en esta parte. Cuando, en mi experiencia, los jóvenes que estaban en aquel entonces, cuando inició la guerra en su parte más fuerte,
In my experience, when the war began, the youth
ahora son parte del crimen organizado, son sicarios,
are involved in the criminal. They're criminals,
los que quedan vivos.
the ones that are alive.
En particular, les puedo hablar de una pandilla
In particular, I'm going to talk about a gang,
de adolescentes
young gang.
que se llamaban los artistas asesinos.
They were called the assassins, artist assassins.
En aquel entonces eran asaltantes y cometían delitos de bajo impacto.
At that time, they would commit assaults and
Crimes, felonies.
crimes and felonies. Sí. Thank you. Gracias.
Con la guerra fueron reclutados por el cártel de Sinaloa
They were recruited by the cartel of Sinaloa,
y todos ellos se convirtieron en su mano de obra barata, sicarios todos.
Victor, can you help?
And they actually became their cheap labor hand and became basically what is known now today as one of their armies, a sicario army.
Thank you.
Si la estrategia hubiera incluido prevención, la
if
parte de
we,
prevención,
could prevent that tragedy,
protección a estos jóvenes y niños en situación de calle
in the situation of what they would live in the streets,
o de familias desintegradas,
or families that were
Families that have been destroyed.
yes.
posiblemente el futuro de estas generaciones fuera otro.
Maybe the future of these generations would have been different.
Sin embargo, la guerra se convirtió solamente en un escenario de una guerra convencional
It became a conventional war,
o una guerra de guerrillas. Una guerra de guerrillas
Guerrilla war.
Yeah. A low intensity war.
y nunca estuvo presente la prevención y el cuidado de niños y jóvenes que ahorita son los sicarios y los que mueren día a día luchando una guerra que ni ellos saben para qué.
So thank you, Pablo. So for me, go ahead, Erica.
Para mí,
I've spent decades working with children and youth in American cities.
él trabajó mucho con muchas décadas with who? I'm sorry.
The adolescents.
Con los adolescentes.
Yep. So to hear how it's even worse in Mexico,
Para entender que es peor en México,
how much less investments there are in education and prevention programs,
y que no invierte en educación ni en
prevention programs.
y prevención en programas.
It's heartbreaking.
Eso me duele.
But let me come back to Dave again. Dave, you do a lot of you're doing a lot of work on trying to change the system, trying to change policies. Tell us a little bit about what your priorities might be. But let's let Erica try to translate that. So I'm gonna ask again. Tell Dave, you're doing a lot of work on trying to change the system.
Dave está haciendo mucho trabajo para cambiar el sistema.
Tell us a few of the priority changes you have.
La prioridad de cambios que él tiene.
One of the ultimate ones would be overdose prevention sites.
Uno que sería prevención de sobredosis.
Last I checked, there were about 163 operating around the world, and there have been 0 fatalities at any of them over more than 3 decades.
Okay.
That's a lot, but try. There's
Sorry.
163 around the world. Go ahead, Dave.
33 alrededor del mundo.
Gracias, Victor.
So 163 around the world, operating 3 decades, 0 fatalities.
30 años y 0 fatalidades.
The ultimate goal would be a safe, regulated supply.
Ultimate goal would be a safe, regulated supply.
Regulación sana de los ingredientes o la medicina necesaria para combatir lo que son las sobredosis.
Not only to buy, but to use.
No solo para comprar, sino para usar.
And if that became a reality, the cartel would lose
El cartel
pretty much would have no income.
Lo que no hace
Next
negocio.
to no income.
So basically what you're saying is that if the United States, the biggest consumer, Erica?
Los consumidores de Estados Unidos, los más consumidores, los altas de consumpción.
If we were to create more regulated supply and use facilities,
si podemos crear materiales,
materia prima para suplir.
we might be able to reduce the number of overdoses
la sobredosis,
and take a big bite out of the cartel's profit line.
Podemos ganarle a un gran pedazo de las ganancias que generan los cárteles o estas TCOs, Transnational Crimes Organizations.
My understanding
mi entendimiento
is that right now those 163 sites
y ahora de 163 lugares
are providing the supply, the regulated supply.
No, they're not.
Okay, so the user has to get the unregulated supply.
El consumidor tiene que tener deregularizado.
And then take it,
adulterated.
And then take it to a facility where they can use under medical supervision.
Correct.
Y llevarlo a un lugar donde puede ser supervisión médico.
No. So do any of you other guys? Go ahead, Albert.
Sorry. I'll be as quick as I can. Primeramente, es importante no criminalizar a los usuarios.
First of all, it's important not to criminalize the users.
En México, en los 30s, los consumidores eran.
In Mexico, in the 30s, the consumers were.
Eran personas que tenían una adicción.
There were people that had an addiction.
Pero después se volvieron criminales.
But then they became criminals.
Y eso aumentó la tasa de violencia.
And that just violence went up.
Ahora bien, algo que debemos entender.
Well, we have to understand.
Que esto no se gana con violencia.
That this is not.
We can't win this war. Yeah.
We can win this war. Yes.
Tenemos que pegarle a el dinero.
We have to hit in the money.
Estas empresas son cárteles. Eso viene de una palabra que tiene que ver con empresas.
These are empresas.
Businesses.
Enterprises.
Yeah.
Enterprises.
International, multinational businesses.
If you hit the head, another one will come. But if you take their money, you could win the war. Algo que debemos hacer es generar impuestos a las drogas.
One thing we should make is generate the impuestos, taxes. To the drugs.
Eso sí le va a pegar a los cárteles.
That's what's going to hit the cartels.
Y por último,
And lastly,
cualquier política policiológica o criminológica
any policy in criminology,
tiene que tener 3 fases para que se considere correcta.
it has to have 3 phases for it to be correct.
La prevención,
The prevention,
la contención
consumption,
Yep.
containment,
y el último, el ataque.
and the attack. Lastly, the attack.
Tienes que prevenir que los niños no las consuman.
We have to prevent for kids not to consume.
Tienes que contener a los que ya son usuarios.
We have to stop for the users.
Y tenemos que atacar a los kingpins, a los capos.
And we have to attack the kingpin.
Si no alineamos esas 3 cosas, lo que hagamos no va a funcionar.
If we don't underline those 3 things, nothing's going to work.
Thank you. And I'm always really curious.
Yo siempre he estado curioso.
Where do they keep all of that money?
¿Dónde mantienen todo ese dinero?
I mean, are we going to start to see banks and bankers brought down too?
Vamos a
We
ver,
already have.
Tell us.
vamos a ver gente que trabaja en el banco también involucrados.
Perfect example would be HSBC, China.
HSBC in China.
Yeah, I mean we're talking about China. We're talking about the very good relationship that China is currently having.
Estamos viendo con la
Mexico.
relación buena que tenemos con China y Mexico.
That's talking about prevention, allowing our children not to get those substances in their
Sí,
systems.
para prevenir que los niños tengan esas constancias.
We prevent the precursors coming in from China to Mexico, being produced in Mexico, and being brought to the entire globe. There's almost zero interdiction of those precursors coming in legally to Mexico from China and then to the entire globe. And we also cannot forget, go ahead, Erica,
También no podemos olvidar
that the manufacturing, the production, the sale,
los
Manufacturing.
aplicación,
que hacen esta
el tráfico de
venta
drogas
y los que hacen la droga.
is not the only way these
Everybody froze.
organizations, these mega conglomerates, business conglomerates, make their money in Mexico. Because you have illegal forestry,
Yes.
illegal fishing, human trafficking, obviously, weapons trafficking, the theft of oil, the theft of minerals, lithium,
Extortion,
silver, gold,
terrorism. Yeah.
the theft of vehicles, the robbery of trains, anything these people can make money from, they do it.
Victor, you're right, but you must remember how the Vegas has, cómo se construyeron Las Vegas.
Uh-huh. Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Wait,
Yes.
how do you say what?
Or Florida
How-
or Miami.
Yeah. This guy,
How
Bugsy
was-
Siegel, Bugsy Siegel, Mayor Lansky, Lucky Luciano, they make what the Vegas is right now. It's money laundering.
Yes.
And it's not in the US or in Mexico only. It's, as Victor says, all over the world. It's Shanghai, it's Macau, it's Cayman Islands, and so on. It's a global thing. And we must, to win this war, we must think in global. Because if we only
I'm going to stop you right there because we're not translating, first of all. But secondly, how on earth are we going to get Americans to think more globally? Thank you, Dave.
That's the question for the next day.
Okay. Tony, you've been really quiet and I haven't called on you very much. Anything else you want to add, Tony? Anything else?
I do want to echo that if there's not a consumer, there's no reason to do what you do. In consuming, with the U.S. being the biggest consumer, I feel like we definitely need to dedicate more resources to help with addiction. But before that, to help with societal issues in the home, issues related to mental health that create this need to medicate, that create this need to not feel or to feel something different. I think that there are holes in our society that we've not addressed. And in some cases, drug use is simply a symptom of something else.
Yep. Lo siento, Pablo. Lo siento, Erica. We're not letting you guys. We're not doing a good job translating, but I appreciate you guys being here. We're at our hour mark. I've been told that we can go over a little bit. Tony, I really appreciate that. So it seems like even though we might. I'm sorry, Erica. I'm going to let you try to. I went stepping all over my translator again. We're at the hour.
I don't know what happened. That I was disconnected.
That's okay. You're back. So we're at the 1 hour mark.
Okay.
Repeat, translate.
Estamos en una hora, que esto era si va a tomar a cabo una hora.
And we can go over a little bit, but I want to be conscious of people's time.
Okay, nos podemos seguir, pero quisiéramos que si todos están de acuerdo y pueden.
And it sounds to me like.
Y eso me parece que.
Even though we might disagree on some of the reforms and solutions,
aunque que no todos estamos de acuerdo de las reformas,
we do agree that prevention, early prevention,
estamos de acuerdo que la prevención,
conversation and in the investments,
que estamos en las
too little, that there's too little investment in prevention.
Que hay muy poco que invertimos en prevención.
It's and especially for youth, for children,
especialmente la juventud de niños,
mental health,
en mental,
salud mental,
and helping to raise the next generation.
Y ayudar para la nueva generación.
With less of a desire to escape.
Para escapar de esta deseo.
Anybody want to add a last comment or two?
¿Alguien quiere hacer un comentario?
Yo trabajé en Guerrero.
I worked in Guerrero.
Cuando pasó lo de Ayotzinapa.
When what happened in Ayotzinapa.
Ayotzinapa, when these 43 students get killed, I was there. I was there at that time. Estaba ahí en ese momento. Y es triste ver cómo los campesinos.
It's sad to see the farmers.
Decir que lo único que tienen para sobrevivir.
To say that the only thing they have to survive.
Es sembrar heroína.
Just
sembrar amapola.
Okay, to grow amapola.
Para dárselas a los carteles.
To give it to the cartels.
Porque si siembran maíz.
Because if they sembrar.
Farm, if they farm corn, no van a tener nada.
They're not going to have anything. They farm corn, they're not going to have anything.
Entonces, como bien comenta Dave.
And what Dave mentioned.
se vuelve una forma de vivir, de sobrevivir más bien.
Just becomes a life to
A lifestyle.
survive, a life to survive.
En Alberto, en Guerrero, el Pentágono de la Amapola.
Estilo de caballos.
Claro que sí.
I got you, Pablo.
We also have to remember of the indigenous peoples from
Tenemos que
Guerrero that
recordar de
get
los
displaced,
indígenas,
and then they get brought into the criminal element like Pablo was talking about. My belief, my true belief, is that this war
y
starts
lo
at
que
the
yo creo
home,
que esta
Home.
guerra empieza en casa,
at the home of every American.
en la casa de cada
To
americano,
prevent this.
para terminar.
Víctor,
Wait. It's Pablo's next, and then you, Albert.
Sí, no olvidemos que
Not forget
algo muy importante, aparte
something
de
important aside
seguir
from
el dinero de los
to go
cárteles,
to the money of the cartel.
también es importante
It's
la
also important
extinción de dominio. Extinción de dominio es
Extinción de
quitarle
dominio.
todos sus
Take
bienes
away.
una vez que tienen ya cargos y los meten a la cárcel. No
To
es
take-
posible que gente como el Chapo Guzmán, familia del Chapo, amigos del Chapo y todos los demás, y hablando solamente de un cártel y no de todos, se queden con todas las riquezas que obtuvieron
He,
por la venta de drogas.
he says that it's not fair that that the cartel or like Chapo, he stayed with all his everything he owned.
Y esas dos estrategias
That's a
de
tragedy.
perseguir el dinero, es decir, luchar contra el lavado de dinero y
To
la extinción de
fight
dominio,
not laundry.
son realmente estrategias de inteligencia.
There's just intelligence tragedies.
No requieren armas,
It doesn't require anything else.
solamente es atacar a la industria del
Just to
crimen
attack the
organizado.
industry of the organized crime.
And you're right, Erica.
Tiene razón.
In America,
En América,
when we start talking about taxing corporations more, taking their profits,
cuando empezamos a quitar los impuestos y las propiedades,
they spend a lot of money on lobbyists.
ellos invierten en mucho dinero en
If we
lobbyists.
if we go after the cartel profits more forcefully,
Si nos enfocamos en los el dinero que hace el
Yep.
profits, se me
Las
fue la-
ganancias.
money's fine.
las
Money's
ganancias,
fine.
sí.
Yeah. If we go after the cartel's money
Si
more
vamos
forcefully,
detrás de las ganancias del cartel,
chasing it electronically around the world more effectively.
ir atrás de
Good luck translating it now. Now we're getting technical on you, Erica.
Siguiendo el dinero, follow the money, tracing the money, siguiendo el dinero alrededor del mundo.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and that's a challenge for America because the privacy concerns and the encryption technology are really getting in the way as well. And don't bother trying to translate that. I see Pablo nodding his head. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Gabe just came back on, turned his video back on. I'm going to turn it back to him. But first, let me give a shout out to Erica. We stepped all over our translator. We ignored her so much. Thank you for trying to translate on topics that you've maybe never really talked about before. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Gabe, take us away, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes. So just so the audience knows, we had several translators lined up and we were not able to get them. And Erica came in at the last minute. And thank you so much for coming in. And you did
You're
a good job under difficult circumstances. So we really do appreciate it. And thank you, JD. Awesome job, brother. I knew you would.
Thank you.
Behind the scenes, and I think it paid off. And for all of our panelists, man, I know each one of you could speak for 8 hours on this subject. So to squeeze all you in 1 hour, I think people got just a snippet, and if you all don't mind, I'm sure there's going to be some questions from our audience later that they weren't able to ask or maybe too shy to ask. And so hopefully we can give them your contacts if you're all okay with that. And then they can, address those to you specifically if they want to ask a certain person. You also all have books out, or at least several of you have books out and websites also. So I would put those out to the as a follow-up to the attendees.